Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. I'm your host, Chris Bartigone, ZP002. Back with me on the show today is my part-time co-host, longtime friend, ZERT instructor, Mr. X, Paul Taylor. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks, man. I missed you a lot. I'm just saying.
I missed you
Been a
too.
while since I've talked.
And boom, there are our names. Look at that. We did not have that up, but
Oh, I used to say Mr. X down there. I don't know what happened. I'm gonna have to fix that. You must be.
Yeah. I guess we will have to fix that. That's your thing to fix. It's funny. You've been on the show recently as much as Jamie has been on the show, so I have dual co-hosts, and I kind of like it. And I know that we have.
I don't know about all that. I don't know. He's on there quite a bit.
No. Well, you guys have. I mean, out of the last 6 weeks, I think there's been just as much Paul Taylor content out there as Jamie Franks, so it's all good. I know that there is an upcoming episode that we all want to kind of do together when we talk about training scars. So I think that's we should probably get that on the books. But
I thought we were just talking about scars, period.
Well, scars too. We got those. Scars. Welcome back to welcome back to the shit show here, Paul. So, it's been a minute since we recorded. And like I said in the past, we always kind of try and get a good amount of shows recorded based off of what's happening in the world today. And while there's a lot happening in the world today, there's good news that it comes out of your daily scrolling all the time. And there's some exciting stuff that we get to share with all of you guys on here. So if you're listening to this show and you are just listening to it on Spotify or Apple, thank you for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, also thank you for being here. We did have a clip to play on for as part of today's show, but unfortunately we're dealing with some technical difficulties, so we will not be able to do that. But if you are listening to this show on Spotify or Apple or wherever you pick up your podcast, and you do want to see some more videos that we do have up on the YouTube channel, head over to YouTube and search ZERT, and you will find all of our videos that also contain the video portion of this podcast, as well as some product reviews and some other good stuff that's been around for 13 years. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you're notified when we put out a new video. And that's as far as I want to go with that whole opening jargon. But there is more. We have obviously lots of cool benefits for folks that are members of ZERT, and we've started to put some of that information out. But one of the cool benefits is listening to this show and seeing Paul's face and seeing my face and seeing Jamie's face. We'd like to put out some good information and have a good time doing it. So thank you for being here. Paul, how has your riding season been going?
Yeah, honestly, I got to say it's been great. And I say that because I've made an effort, an actual like big time effort to anytime I get a chance to get on one of my two bikes, and both bikes serve a purpose. And unfortunately, I've been riding one a lot more than the other. Thank goodness these motorcycles don't have feelings and stuff, or the one bike would be pretty pissed off right now. But
I bet.
I've had, I think we're going to do a video on here pretty soon talking about mental health and stuff. But along with doing a lot of shooting, which the benefit is I have my own range, as you know, and a lot of the listeners know. I use riding motorcycles to help me kind of get through some stuff. And I've kind of neglected riding bikes, just that freedom and that release and that solitude and just sitting back. And there's just so many benefits of riding bikes. And I've kind of, in the last couple of years, have denied myself some of that just because of kind of sort of this state that I was in and feeling that I didn't deserve certain things or certain comforts. And I made it a point this year to just, say, screw certain things. Certain things don't need to get done. You always have a list of things you need to do, and there's no problem with putting something off when it's a sunny day and just pull one of my two bikes out and just go for a ride, because sometimes it's exactly what you need.
Yeah, and so on a recent on a recent Facebook Live that we did, the subject of a ZERT riding club, or not a gang, not a motorcycle club, came up, and it's been something that you and I have teased and talked about in the past. I know a few members that ride, and we've talked about doing some kind of meetup at Sturgis, and it's just it hasn't worked out, and that's just life and logistics. There's a lot of things that you know are kind of in the ether on top of all that's happening that I want to get done for ZERT. And you just, a lot of things require planning and logistics, and there's a lot of pieces they're moving pieces, and sometimes they all just don't work out. And, anytime something gets thrown out there as an event, or as um, uh, like a meetup or a training or an event that we want to do that doesn't take place, it affects me the most. It affects me probably more than a lot of the people that were excited for it, because it's something that I put a lot of time in, and I know that we wanted to do that with the motorcycle thing. And in that same topic of conversation, and it's kind of been a hot topic for the past couple of days, is obviously a ZERT motorcycle patch. And there's just been some back and forth on that, and that's fine. And that's still an ongoing conversation that would like to have. But, much like you, riding is my form of relaxation and therapy. I don't know about you, and I'll get to it in a second, but my riding journey started back before I was able to ride. And that was because my father rode. My father grew up owning a motorcycle and riding a motorcycle. And at one point he got into a pretty bad accident, ended up on the hood of a car off the embankment, and left there. And he was fine. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm sure you've heard this, that it's not a matter of if you go down, it's just when you go down. And knock on wood, I haven't, and I hope I never do, and I hope I never witness or am around anybody that does. I take that back. I was riding with a buddy of mine many, many years ago who went down behind me, and ended up wrecking the bike and gotten pretty banged up. But it's, listen, you realize that when you go swimming in the ocean, you're going to be swimming with sharks. And you realize when you go ride a motorcycle, you're riding on the road with dumb people. And that's just a fact of riding. How long have you been riding, Paul?
Oh, the funny thing about that, and you're talking about riding with your dad. I got an itchy nose. I just gotta figure out what's going on here. But
Great.
two things that I wasn't allowed to do growing up, as long as I lived with my parents, was having a gun and having a motorcycle, which is
Really?
crazy considering
Really?
who I am now. But yeah, I was very accident prone growing up,
Yeah.
and my parents thought that I was going to probably shoot myself or die on a motorcycle. So never rode a motorcycle, never shot a gun, joined the military.
Wow.
And my first half decent purchases I did, joined the Marine Corps, went out to California, bought a gun, bought a Ruger P89 for those of y'all that know what that handgun is. And I bought a CBR 600 F2. And yeah, I was 20. And of course, I totaled it, as
oh boy,
I've totaled quite a few motorcycles and had quite a few accidents. But the two main things that I used for therapy is riding bikes and shooting guns, and I blame my parents for that, just because if they would have just not denied me, it's like the Catholic schoolgirl type of philosophy.
Okay.
And but
right.
Yeah, that's the two things I love doing, and it's my parents' fault. So
yeah. So what's funny about that is I grew up, and I think it was a time between when my father didn't have a motorcycle and when he did, we had a little, what was called a moped. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with the term now. They're, called scooters or whatnot, but it was a little moped that had like pedals, but also, you would get going and it took gas as well. And, growing up, before I was of age to ride or drive a car, they would let me take the moped out on our street, because it was a a quiet neighborhood. There wasn't a lot of cars, a lot of activity, and they would let me take the moped, and I would literally just go from one end of the street to the other, back and forth, just riding. nowadays kids would probably just be doing that on their phones in the house just there, but that's what I got to do. I got to take that thing back and forth. So I learned how to ride that way. And then I'll never forget, I was 16 years old, I believe. Yeah, 16 years old. I was working at the local ice cream shop in the town that my parents had a business in. And here comes my mom and dad up to visit me at work. And my mom's in a car and my dad's on this little 1980 Honda CM 400. And sure enough, they got it for me. They figured out size wise what would work. And one of their customers at the time had this bike that he was just getting rid of, and it was so clean. And yeah, man, they bought me my first little motorcycle. I didn't have a license. I wasn't allowed to actually ride it yet. And it was 6 months before I was getting my license, but I spent every single day going out there with navel jelly and a toothbrush, and I was getting all the rust off, and I was detailing that thing every single day. Now, here's the caveat to that. I couldn't ride it. Obviously the moped had no gears. I didn't, so it was just getting on and throttle. So here I've got this motorcycle that I don't know how to ride. And I remember every day sitting there trying, and I couldn't get it. I remember my cousin coming over who knew how to ride motorcycles, and I was washing it, and he came over, and he was a dick. He was a dick about it. Comes over, hops on my motorcycle, and takes right off. I'm like, nope, no way. I'm not going inside until I figure out how to do this. And sure enough, but within an hour, I was riding that motorcycle, changing gears, the whole thing. So that was my introduction to my motorcycle. And unfortunately, I was young and stupid and didn't know about maintenance and ran the thing dry on oil.
Yeah, mine was a little different than that.
Yeah, I bet. But it's funny you mentioned that CBR. That was one of my dream bikes during high school. I was like, oh, I want that bike so bad. And
Yeah.
Never went the route of the crotch rocket, if you will.
Yeah, that was definitely it's funny because my entire family here in PA, they're all Harley owners. And first time I, came here with a crotch rocket, they're all disowning me and talking smack. And it's like, I'll never own a Harley. And after I totaled 2 crotch rockets, after the CBR, I totaled that, spent a month in the hospital, got a pretty nice skin graft on my arm. You can probably still see it a little bit.
Boy. For those that are watching, there you go. You're welcome.
So I went out. I was on convalescent leave. I was a Marine at the time, came home on convalescent leave. It was the middle of winter, and I bought a brand new, and they just redid it, 96 Gixxer 750.
Oh,
so it's like my parents like, are you trying to kill yourself? And it's like, hey, you fall off a horse, you get right back on.
Yeah.
And I totaled that, and
it's
time to start slowing down. So I bought my first Harley, and I don't know, 8 Harleys later, still on a Harley, and made a transition to dual sports and adventure bikes. Yeah. Life is good.
Yeah. So, those of us that ride, and those of obviously you and I that ride, and those of you that are listening that ride, you kind of understand what we're talking about here. It's that freedom of the open road, so to speak, the wind in your hair kind of situation. I mean, for me, some people out there love going fast, and I don't understand it, but that's fine. I mean, there's a level of that, but what I love about riding is not that. It's kind of getting lost and kind of becoming a part of that road and heading into curves and corners and kind of leaning into that and understanding, I don't want to say the limitations of your bike, but what you can do on your bike as a seasoned rider. If you watch those, and I got to tell you that motorcycle police officers, they go through some rigorous training when it comes to riding. And there's, like I had to go. So when I finally went to go get my license, I had to take the motorcycle rider safety course. Now, at that point, I had already been riding, so I kind of was ahead of the rest of the class, that we were a bunch of newbies. But they run you through that course, and you have to do all of the obstacles, and you can't really fail it. Well, have you ever seen some of those videos where the motorcycle cops are running those electroglides through that course?
Oh yeah, I mean that stuff with
Ooh.
like the 1,000 cones out there, and they're pretty
Oh
much
my.
doing they're scraping pegs going around low speed,
Oh,
basically figure eights, and it's awesome to watch. I
it
don't
is.
think now here's the deal: all motorcycle cops can't do that.
No,
You know,
no, you're
it's
right.
just like every cop. There's fantastic
Right.
firearm shooters out there who are cops, but that doesn't mean every
Right.
one of them are.
You're
But
100% right. You're
but yeah,
100% right.
but like you said, in order to ride a motorcycle onto a military base, you have to go through those courses. And the best thing I love about those courses, and I've been, you know, I shoot, I was 20, I'm 52 now. I've been riding for 32 years.
Right.
And the best thing about those courses is watching people that don't know how to ride. I hate to
Oh,
say
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but you're
Yeah.
gonna, you know, I have, you know, at Fort Bragg, and it'll always be brag to me. Uh,
Right.
you know, I had SF buddies that just would, you know, buy a brand new bike and they're out there trying to do some of these obstacles, and you know, they just bought a $25,000 Harley Davidson and they're laying it over, and it's just
Oh,
fun to watch
jeez.
sometimes. But it's
Yeah.
like, dude, buy a little Honda Shadow, learn on it, but you go
Right.
deploy, you get this huge paycheck and you want to buy a Harley. But it's like, dude,
Right.
like you said, if you have the mentality that there's those who have wrecked and those who will, drop that beginner bike a couple of times before you spend a little money. But
Oh my God. Listen, going down on a motorcycle is not fun. And it, think about when you were a kid and you were riding your bicycle and you went down on that. It's that just a lot worse because the bike is obviously a lot heavier and something you don't want to get pinned underneath.
well, I got to
Um,
tell you, you say that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but now that I've got
no.
a dual sport,
Oh,
one
well,
of the
yeah.
things I'm doing is training. Um, we're doing a lot of single track and wood riding, and there's a lot of logs that I could go around or
Sure.
get off my bike and go over, but I want to learn how to jump over these logs. So I've been doing a lot of drills, and I've taken the firearms instructor mentality to this, where it's like, you know what? I shouldn't wait until we do these weekend rides to go practice this stuff. I can practice this stuff in my yard because this is what I teach other people to do. You know,
Right.
go to the range, practice this stuff between classes. And
Right.
now that I've been practicing all these drills, I have found that I'm falling a lot more. But when you're
Yeah.
on a dual sport and you're in grass, you got all your protective gear on. It's not a
Right.
1,000-pound Harley Davidson. I would
Right.
rather fall on this dirt bike that's meant to be dropped
Yeah.
than,
Now, what
you know,
does
and
that
get
bike
those out of the
weigh?
way.
Yeah. What does that
Oh,
bike weigh?
shoot, 250 pounds maybe. Now,
Okay.
in saying that, I bought a used, this is my second dual sport. It's a KTM EXE 500. It's basically some say it's the top of the line dual sport motorcycle. It's a race bike with a license plate, turn signals, headlight. I have no business owning this thing, but it is fun.
Why do you say
It's an
that?
absolute blast. Because uh, it's so far. I, I should be on slow things.
Okay.
I should probably be on a moped. I should be on a
Okay.
Harley. This thing is way too fast. It's a now I know how to lay off the throttle, but this thing's made to do wheelies. This thing's made to be ridden, so to
Right.
speak. You know, it's kind of
Right.
like me going out and buying a Mustang GT 500. I have no
Right.
business owning that car.
Right.
So
And I
it's
got
almost the
to,
same mentality.
right. And I have to agree with you to an extent. I mean, there was a short stint where I did own a dirt bike. I can't remember the CCs. It might have been like a Honda CR 250 or something like that. I was going to buy it and a buddy of mine had it and he was like, well, listen, why don't you, try it out for a month, see if if you like it, this, that, and the other thing. And, I was younger at the time. And I remember, I think all of the time I had it, I don't really remember the front wheel being on the ground. Like it was just a wheelie machine. Like you were just on the back wheel, just having a blast. I say that now and looking at some of the riding that you've done and even some of the other riding that you and I have talked about, like there is nothing more than I would like to do than to hop on one of those dual sports with the hard cases and bags and do a moto camp with something like that. When you and I talked about doing a moto camp, we were going to meet up on the Harleys and go for our ride with that. You can do the same with the dual sports and have a blast doing it. I guess if you were going to go cross country though, which bike would you choose?
Man, that's a hard one because there are dual sport and adventure bike routes going across the country where they stay on dirt.
Dirt.
Like they've got those
Okay.
planned. And I did and you know about this. There's a loop around Pennsylvania, about a 4-day loop, and I did that with a buddy of mine where we moto camped. And I did it on my
Okay.
dual sport. And there's all these routes across the US. Some of the viewers or listeners might know. They're called BDRs, back road discovery routes.
Okay.
And there's one going from like Virginia up to Maine on the East Coast. There's some going through the Dakotas, California, Colorado. They're just all over. And every year they're making a new one. And
Hmm.
we've talked about camping out on the Harleys, but
Yeah.
I just, man, the cool thing about dirt roads and gravel roads, and you get away from everybody. If
I
you're on a
like that.
Harley, you can take
Yeah.
back roads, but there's still cars. There's still
Right.
people. Dirt
Right.
roads, there's a lot less people out there. There's more deer. There's more
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
you have to, but you're not going as fast either. So
Yeah.
there's definitely
But you
benefits to both of them.
right, but you can also take your bike from that trail to the road should you need to, because obviously you're not finding gas stations in the woods. You're going to have to get to a gas station and go. So I do like that. I do like that a little bit more. But let's talk comfortability. Which is a more comfortable ride?
Oh, absolutely, the Harley. And
Okay.
saying that, I spent a couple years ago, I was out in Colorado and rode a BMW GS,
Y-
and that was a really comfortable bike.
Yeah.
So when you're
Yeah.
looking at cross country, that bike was phenomenal. There are adventure bikes out there, and that's the problem. My bike's considered a light adventure bike, where my tank is 3 gallons. I'm not going to get
Right.
the fuel mileage. A lot of it has to do with planning, but you can carry containers that have more fuel, just in case. But comfort, I mean, I do have an aftermarket seat on my bike, but after 4 days of riding that motorcycle, I didn't ride it for a little bit just
Yeah. I
because.
bet.
But the cool thing about an adventure bike or a dual sport or dirt bike, I mean, your tush gets sore, you stand up and
Right.
you kind of like so there's so many benefits. There's benefits and drawbacks to everything.
Right.
So, and the cool thing about a motorcycle, your rear end gets sore, you just get off for a little bit, walk
Yeah.
around, check out the
So
sights.
one of the things that you just mentioned is planning, and obviously for all those listening that understand what ZERT is about, it's about being a prepared individual in today's day and age. And what one of the key factors in being prepared and being a survivalist is planning. So you can plan for things like riding across country, but there's always the time when you can't plan for the unexpected, or the situation on a bike where uh, you you get stranded. Um, One of the things, and this is what we kind of were leading into today, obviously talking about our passion of riding and our plan to meet up. Where we were going to meet up, it was about a 4 hour ride for you, a 4 hour ride for me, and then meeting up and then camping and riding from there. Uh, and 4 hours is not a drop in the bucket when it's on a motorcycle. It's easy when you're in a car for the most part, but 4 hours on a bike is a little bit tiresome, if you will, depending on what kind of bike you're on. Okay. So riding on a Harley where you can kick your legs out on the highway pegs and you've got maybe a satchel or a bag as your backrest. Okay. You can get a little comfortable, but riding 4 hours on a crotch rocket, forget it. All hunched over, like horrible. Like you said, with the dual sport, you're a little bit more upright in your riding position and you can stand up on the pegs. And it's funny, you see a lot of those guys riding that way. I've ridden with a couple of them in our group and they're standing the entire time. And I'm just like, what do you guys do? Sit down. You're making me nervous. You're stressing me out. Sit down, relax. But uh, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this show, because we're both riders and we both have a plan to do some longer riding. I mean, I wanted to go do a Sturgis ride, and that's a long ride. But the other thing is I just saw a little clip, and this was the thing that we were going to play today, and I can't, so we'll just kind of set the stage with it right now. And I don't know if y'all know who Robert Patrick is, he's an actor, and obviously he's probably most well known for his role as the T-1000 in Terminator 2. Well, he's an avid Harley rider. And there's some stories out there. There's some great videos out there, and if you search them, you'll find them. But Harley Davidson basically saved his life, because I don't know if it provided some of that same type of therapy that you and I refer to, but it does. It helps. But there's a story that he told, and I don't know where he said he was riding to, but he was riding and he was in Arizona, and he had Mexico to his right, and he was avoiding Phoenix to his left on his way to Tucson. And I think he said he was about 100, maybe 100 miles out, and his rear tire blew. And he's talking about it in reference to some of the characters he's played as being, he's always been a tough guy, or he's played a tough guy. And so here he is riding this motorcycle, and the rear tire blows out. So for any of you that are listening that are riders, if you've experienced that, you know what that's like. If you don't, if you haven't experienced that and you don't know what that's like, it's probably the scariest thing ever, depending on what speed you're at. And if he was the way of his story is basically he's not in a really populated area. I'm sure he was going highway speeds, and your rear tire blows out. Now, I've never experienced it. Have you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
You
had
have.
on my Jix ride, my rear tire blow out at 100 miles an hour. Thank goodness
Wow.
it was on a straightaway.
Yeah.
And hit a big old pothole, and it just blew it. And yeah, it was
Right.
very unsettling.
Yeah. And so my father's had it happen to him. So I've heard about it through that. So first and foremost, your ass end on that bike just starts kicking left and right, just starts fishtailing. And
Yeah, imagine if you didn't have anti-lock brakes and you just stomped your brake pedal and kept it on there.
right.
And just, I mean, it's basically the equivalent of like a controlled skid, so to speak,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Now, where that gets bothersome is if you are not experienced and you have not done enough training and you do not know what to do. Because most people are going to panic right off the bat. And what's the first thing they're going to do, Paul?
Well, most of the time in a panic, people, especially like around turns and stuff, they'll hit the brakes, stand the bike straight up, and target fixate and go exactly where you don't want to go.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Right.
I've seen that happen too.
Exactly. That's 100% correct. Most people will go for the brake because what they're going X amount of miles per hour. They want to slow down, right? Because speed is not your friend at that point. Being stationary is your friend, and they hit the brakes. And if you're fishtailing on a motorcycle and you hit the brakes, it's going to be a bad day. And what they teach you to do in that situation is to just obviously let off the throttle, and you have to ride that thing out. Like just remove all speed, no brakes, nothing. Just keep the bike balanced and coast to a stop. So that's the first thing he does, right? So that's the first obstacle you have to overcome when you are not prepared to do it. So I guess it comes down to mindset and being able to realize what's happening and not panic. And we talk about that a lot. We've talked about that in numerous episodes over the course of this show. Is when you find yourself in this situation, sure, you've been trained, you've got gear, but it comes down to what is your mindset doing at that point? Like, where are you at? Can you stay cool, calm, and collective?
And you bring up a good point, and this is one of the things, and the military made us do it. But if you've ever been through a motorcycle safety course, they put obstacles out there. They
Right.
put cones, and they'll put a 2x4 or a log across the road. And you gotta, even if you gotta, now we're not talking a log like a 2-foot log, but like a
Right.
small log, and
Yep.
you drive over this stuff, or you've got to maneuver around stuff, and this kind
Right.
of, it's training. just
Yep.
like kind of sort of firearms training,
Sure.
and exposes you. So now you're more comfortable. You're used to, you're kind of conditioned. You've been in that scenario before, and they
Right.
tell you, practice this stuff. Go
Right.
get in a parking lot, put a 2x4 down, and especially with when you ride with groups, go out and practice and train. And that's sort of, what I'm doing now with these dual sports. It's one of those things where you don't just want to, I kind of, I'm going to kind of go out on a tangent here a little bit, but I've taught driving courses, and part of
Okay.
those driving courses, they talk about anti-lock brakes. Uh, an anti-lock brake system on your car is a pulsating, brake system where it doesn't let you go to 100 percent, because that locks up your tires. But
Right.
it goes from like 99 and it pulsates down to 90 and back up to 99. Anti-lock brakes is not the most efficient way to stop your car. It is threshold braking. It's finding that point, but finding that point is training, going out there and practicing this stuff, figuring out exactly how much pressure you can apply to your brakes before you lock them up. That's what these race car drivers figure out. That's what they figure this out, because you don't want, in order to stop as proficient as possible, you don't want anti-lock brakes. And I apologize if I offend somebody out there, but anti-lock brakes are for people that don't know how to drive. And
True.
if you learn how to drive and you train and you practice and figure out threshold braking, that maximum amount, you don't need anti-lock brakes. But we're so taught to, you see something in front of you, you brake and you just lock
Right.
everything up.
Yeah.
But if you train that
Yeah.
out of your system, whether you're on a motorcycle or in a car, you're setting yourself up for success. But it takes training, just like
Yeah.
firearms, just
Yeah,
like
it does.
everything else.
I mean, riding a motorcycle, I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna follow it up. Riding a motorcycle, or learning to ride a motorcycle in a straight line, is not very challenging, right? The hardest part is getting the bike going and stopping the bike and not stalling. We've all ridden bicycles growing up, so you know how to do that. But when you start getting into the leaning and the turning and the counter steering, that's when it starts to get challenging. And that comes, like, they teach you a little bit of that in the rider safety course, but not completely. Sure, yeah, that, like you said, you put a 2x4 in the middle of the road and you got to figure out how to, you know if you're going through a corner and there's an obstacle in the middle of the road, you don't take that obstacle on the lean. You got to bring that bike straight up and go over it. You don't hit the brakes in a curve because you're freaking out. You throttle through that curve to get through it, and you got to use counter steering. There's a lot that goes into it.
I think one of the first things they talk about is railroad tracks going at an angle. You don't hit the brakes
Yeah.
because you're putting all that weight on your front suspension. It's going to grab and you're going to go down. You don't have to give it a ton of gas, but what you don't do is, motorcycle riding has a lot to do with the suspension, going in, compressing that suspension at certain times is not a good thing, and so on and so on. But yeah, there's so many things. If there's a 2x4, you don't slam on your brakes before the 2x4, because now you're going to hit that thing and the front end's going to wash out. But it's funny that you talk about counter steering. The first time I rode my CBR on the highway, I'm used to riding in a parking lot, and to turn, you turn your handlebars. Well, when I got up to speed, I'm trying to turn my handlebars and my bike's going the wrong way. And just because
Wow.
of counter steering, I had no idea what
No.
counter
Yeah.
steering was.
Yeah.
And it was a right-hand turn. This is taking me into traffic because I'm trying to steer. My buddy's behind me, and I'm finally leaning to the point where I'm just like going into traffic. And it was a life or death situation. But at that point, it was like, okay, figure out what counter steering is and live, or
Yep.
don't and die, because I'm heading towards traffic on a freaking
Yeah.
road,
Yeah.
not knowing anything about counter steering,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
lessons learned.
Oh yeah. Counter steering is pretty wild when you start to or when you first are introduced to it, you're like, what? This
Yeah, it
doesn't
just
make any
doesn't make any
sense.
sense.
But then you do it and you're like, oh, got it. Now it makes sense. So anyway, the next piece is of Robert Patrick's story is the real funny part. Because here he gets the bike stopped. He realizes he's in the middle of nowhere, and he's got to make he's got to make an assessment and figure out what to do next. So first thing he does is he grabs his knife and he starts cutting off the back tire, because in his mind, he's going to ride this motorcycle on the rim all the way into Tucson. Now, what he realized at that point is he's got no water, he's got no food, and he's stuck out there stranded. I'm picturing, if you've been to Arizona, and I'm just picturing this lonely, dark highway, with nothing but desert on both sides and city lights off in the distance. But that's the situation that he has in front of him. Like, okay, what am I going to do here? You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about cutting the motorcycle tire off. That's pretty, I mean, that's, again, it's pretty intense right there. I don't know that you can cut through a tire with a knife. So maybe that's not as accurate. Plus it's the rear tire. So depending on what kind of motorcycle, it's also a little bit of a challenge unless you lay that bike down.
I think it depends on what kind of knife also. So if you got a big Rambo knife with the serrated edge, but then why are you wanting to ruin your rim?
Right.
Eventually, like, you're going to ruin that rim. And I guess with him, money's no object, maybe, and he'll go buy another rim.
Well,
but there's
sure.
Probably might be other
right.
courses of action there.
Well, you're talking about riding it. Yeah. So listen, obviously that was his first, and this is where the story just kind of takes a turn. That was his first thought. And then and this is where the crowd laughed when he was telling the story. And then he realized he's got a cell phone, he's got AAA, and he's fine. And that's great, right? Sure. If you've got that and you can do that, then you're out of that situation. But I can tell you that the summer of 2020, when I had just gotten the bike and I decided that I was going to go out for a ride and just get lost. And I remember riding up past Kent Falls, and I was going up in that area. And the whole time I'm riding, I'm like, gosh, I never stop and like enjoy any of the scenery and take pictures. And it was a beautiful ride. So I decided to stop, pull off. There was a little picnic table. I pull off. I sit there for a second. Nobody else is there. It's like a little, like a little side parking lot there with a park bench, and there's a little river running next to it, like a little creek or whatnot. And I get off the bike. I go and I take some pictures. I go back to the bike, get ready to leave, turn the bike on, go to start it. I get nothing but clicks. And I'm like, what the hell? I just got the bike a couple of weeks ago. Granted, it was a used Harley, but what the hell? Go to start again. Nothing. No power, nothing. Now, at this point, I'm like, I'm not sitting here. I'm like, okay, is it the battery? Can I pop start this thing? You're talking a bagger, right? 800 pounds ish. You're not running that down a small incline and popping the clutch and on your way. But so I was like, okay, well, let's get the cell phone out and we'll just call for help. Grab the cell phone, zero service, nothing. Now, it's a semi-busy road, but I'm sitting there. So what do I start? Do I just start waving my hands around to start flagging somebody down? A couple of motorcycles drive by and they give me the thumbs up, and I'm just like, giving them the no good. They kept on rolling, and cars are just rolling by me. And I'm like, okay, I've got to figure this thing out. So I start walking with my cell phone, because we all rely on these things to get us out of a jam. And, in that situation, he was able to make that phone call and do it. But I mean, what happens if your cell phone has no service and you are not in an area where I was? Now, granted, I was able to walk about 150 yards up the road and I got a little bit of cell service, and I was able to make a phone call, and I was able to call I couldn't do much. So I ended up just calling. I think I called my father. I gave him my location. I said, see if you can get a flatbed out here. And we were able to get that and get the bike up on the flatbed. So go ahead.
Yeah. What you said earlier about, it's nice to have a plan, but you can't always plan for everything. And I think you're wrong. And
Okay.
one of the things in the military that we plan for, and if you look in the back of the Ranger handbook, there you got the NOP order, and you've got this plan where you got to account for everything. And the very back, it goes over contingencies, and part of
Okay.
those contingencies is planning for worst case scenarios, and sometimes just having an overall, hey, just thinking about, hey, if Lord forbid this happened, this is what I might do. And that's part of your plan because you're considering that stuff. And when I totaled my CBR and I got my little road rash, it happened at I was I was out in California, met a girl. We went on a late night motorcycle ride, went around this corner a little too fast, scared her. She leaned up, brought
Oh,
the bike
okay.
off the side of the road. We ended up in the dirt. She went over me, but it basically almost ripped my arm off. This is at like 2 a.m. on a
Mm.
backcountry California road, nobody around. And of course, I'm going into shock. I mean, everything's ripped up. She's not well, even though she went over me. And as we're sitting there, and this is in 1995, I can tell you I didn't have a cell phone in 1995. There was no cell
Okay.
phone option.
Yep.
And in the distance, I saw a light. I was like, I got person's house. I'm going to walk up there. And as I got up to the entrance to the driveway, this light was like a mile away. It's like there's no way and I'm bleeding like from places. It's like if I walk up this driveway and that they're not there, I've set myself up for failure. I need to walk back to my motorcycle, try to, figure out a plan. And while we were there, a car, and it was one of those things where my motorcycle's trashed. I turned the headlight on just so it was shining in the road so somebody could see that I was in a wreck, and a guy stopped at like
Oh,
2
wow. Okay.
a.m. He called 911, cops showed up, paramedics showed up, but you have to, in whatever state that you're in, I think the biggest thing is maintain, be calm,
Yeah.
be sensible.
Yeah.
And that's part of your plan is like, there's so many things where, I've had the unpleasant experiences of listening to firefights on the radio.
Yeah.
And sometimes, man, those people on the radio, they're freaking out and this and that. And sometimes individuals are calm.
Yeah.
And those individuals that are calm and relaying information, they're the ones getting their point across. And those are the people's like, man, that person's been here before. And there's no reason to freak out because listen to 911 calls sometimes. And you're like, man, that guy's, and part of it, no matter how bad it is. And I'm not saying don't overreact, but if you've already accounted for contingencies out there and worst possible scenarios, you've thought through some of this stuff. And I tell you, on a ride, if you take a long distance ride, you're thinking about this stuff, like everything
Yeah.
that might
And
possibly happen. Worst case scenario. What if I
yeah.
was junked by 30 people? What am I going to do? Maybe that's why he was staying out of Tucson. I don't know.
Right. Maybe. Who knows? Well, no, I
But
think
it's
that's
nice
where
to
he's
have
heading.
contingencies.
Yeah, it is. Um, you know, but going back to planning for that, when we talk about traveling in our vehicle and we talk about, a get home bag or a medical bag, you're allowed or you're allotted a little bit more because of the size of your vehicle, right? So if you're driving from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma, you know that, okay, I should have, maybe a little bit extra in this, a little bit of extra of that, but you've got the room to do it based on the vehicle that you're taking. Whether you're riding from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma or Pennsylvania to, to California, um, the space on a motorcycle is as minimal and as can be, right? You're talking super minimalist. It doesn't matter if you have, well, I take that back. I mean, it does matter if you have a bagger versus just a soft tail or whatnot, where there's no bags, and you're just using a duffel bag, but that you're strapping onto the back. Um, there's only so much room that you have for things that you may or may not need. We've talked about in the past, you know, car camping versus hike through. Well, this is your motorcycle equivalent of hike through camping, and having to trim down what you're going to bring. But you also run the risk of not having what you need.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because when I go out for 2 weeks hiking, I'm very much a minimalist, and the benefit of being on a motorcycle is I can carry more stuff on my motorcycle than I can whenever I'm walking. So when I look at it like that, it's like, oh, on a motorcycle, I carry more stuff. Now it's definitely less stuff in a car, but I'm going to ask you and a bunch of viewers out there, when you take a long road trip in your vehicle, do you have a toolkit with you? Do you bring tools?
No,
Yeah,
no.
that's most
Well, I
people.
mean,
Now, in
not a
saying that,
full,
you probably have a spare tire
well,
and
yeah,
stuff to change a spare tire, but
yeah,
I
I
don't
do.
hardly ever have a toolkit in my car.
Right,
Anytime I take a long trip on my Harley or my dual sport, I have tools with me. And the cool thing with the
so
dual sport is I have enough stuff to change a tire on my dual sport. There's no way I can change a tire out there on the Harley, because I don't
right,
have a
right,
jack and I don't have this and have that.
right.
But there's probably a Harley dealership somewhere in the next city. you
So
know.
what tools do you bring? I mean, what makes you, or, I'm sorry, how do you determine the tools to bring on this type of trip with a motorcycle? And I guess, does that determine, or is that determined by your skill set as a person who is mechanically inclined to use the tools, right? So,
Well, and I think that's a good point too. And this is something that whenever we were talking about doing this video, I thought about. And I don't know how many people that listen change the oil in their cars or their trucks. I don't have the room to do that yet, to jack my car up, and this and that. Now that I have a 2-car garage, I'm eventually going to start changing my own oil. I got to tell you, it's a lot easier to work on a motorcycle than it is to work on a car. It's smaller. It's less things to take off. And I'm not just talking about popping a hood, but I did my oil change and air filter, changed my brake pads, and did all the maintenance on my KTM about 4 days ago, and it took less than half a day.
right,
And the convenience of it, changing a tire on that KTM,
right,
most of the time it's just watching a YouTube video. And even out in the field on the trail, I ride with a group of guys, and they're constantly getting flat tires, and everybody pitches together and get their tools out and changes. They'll put another tube in a tire, and it is pretty easy. And that's the convenience of a dual sport. It's very easy to work on a motorcycle. Harleys, the cool thing about the RPMs of a Harley and those engines are, I don't want to say they're bulletproof, but they
right,
idle, and their RPMs, I mean, they're meant to last. Before you do a road trip, man, change your oil, do preventive maintenance, no matter what vehicle you have. And your chances of that vehicle going down or having an issue, it's not going to reduce to nothing, but you're increasing the likelihood of a good trip. And that doesn't mean that you don't take tools. I have a basic, my dual sports metric, because it's European, and
right,
then my Harley Davidson is standard. So I have just a small toolkit to remove covers for my battery, to remove certain things that, plates. I don't have anything on my Harley to take a wheel off, because I'm not going to do that. But I have
right,
everything on my KTM to literally change out a tube. And the cool thing with a adventure bike, if you can't change out a tube, there's a technique and people can look it up. You can actually zip tie your tire to your rim and ride for a while. And the only reason why you're doing that is so it doesn't rotate and rip your valve stem off. So there's so many things you learn when you're riding with groups and you go through these issues. I mean, there's a ton of knowledge out there. And man, if you don't know how to do something, I've seen guys Harleys break down and they'll get their cell phone out and watch YouTube videos right there on the side of the road and figure
yeah,
something out. But you need the tools for that,
yeah. And what's funny is, there is a little like a multi-tool kit that Harley sells on their website, and it's got all of the right sockets, right size sockets for all of the things that are on the bike. I do have that. I have a multi-tool in there, um, which is, like you said, enough to probably take the seat off, the cover off the battery, whatever you need to do. But to your point, you're not changing a tire on the Harley. They're not tubes, with the exception, the bike that I have is not a tube. It's a solid rim, but there are Harleys out there that do have tubes that, have the spokes and whatnot. So, the spoked wheels. So there is a situation where you do have to do that. I guess my question to you then is, if a person's out there that is not mechanically inclined to do repairs, does it make sense for them to bring a toolkit? Now, I know what you say, because you just said it, you can look up on the phone how to do something real quick, but does it make sense to take up valuable space for something else? I guess that's just a question for each individual to answer on their own.
Yeah, I agree with that. But my advice, if you own a Harley Davidson, is to learn how to work on your bike. And that's not because Harleys break down, but because the chances of you out in the middle of nowhere, it's man, this is you are, and that's the cool thing about bikes, is they're so easy to work on. Everything now, as long as you don't have a Hayabusa that's covered in plastic, or some
Right.
dresser that's, you got to take all this stuff off. It's kind of, there's manuals out there, and even for cars, you know, when you look in the back of an owner's manual, just look at all the stuff that it says about troubleshooting.
Right.
Man, that's the very first thing you should do, and just go through that list and print it out, save it to your phone, do whatever. But there's so much information in those things. It's like, hey, it's probably, if your bike breaks, you're probably going to spend a couple $100 to get it towed to a shop that is probably something that you could have probably fixed out there, and
Yeah.
it would have saved you a little bit of money. And you're getting to know that vehicle, just
Yeah.
like, and we hate to keep going on about the amount of times that I've worked at a gun shop where somebody comes in with an AR and says, "Hey, my bullet's stuck in the chamber."
Right.
And they don't know to mortar their AR. They don't know how to do that. And you just sit
Right.
there and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you can do that." It's like, and I don't want to say, they just don't know what they don't know. And we say
Yeah,
that
of
so
course.
many times. A lot of this stuff is easy. My nephew's a mechanic, and I'll have an issue and he'll come over. He's like, "Oh, that's an easy fix." And I was like, "Darn it. How did I not know that?" Just because I'm not he knows all the
Well,
little
yeah.
secrets, but
Right.
when you're hanging out with them, now I get to know my vehicle. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Listen,
the ultimate goal.
well, I agree. And I don't think there is anything wrong with not knowing how to work on your vehicle to an extent, right? I think every person out there, man or woman, should know how to change their battery on their vehicle, should probably know how to change the tire on their vehicle, an air
Check for
filter.
spark
ch-
plugs.
ch- check for spark plugs, change the oil. Like there's a couple of basic things. Should you know how to change a timing belt, or a, a cylinder head cover, or a head gasket? No. I mean, if you do, that's great. But if you've got to like change the rear seals in your motor, or listen, leave that to the professionals. Just like if you're not a gunsmith and you watch a gunsmithing video and you go and try and work on your firearm and it doesn't work, then that's on you. But you brought up YouTube, and sure, there might be some videos on how to change the head gasket out on your 1989 Chevy Impala, but you know, do it
Yeah,
at your own risk.
there there's no way I'm switching out the belt on a Harley Davidson. So there's no reason to bring another belt. But I
Right.
will bring a master link for my chain on my KTM, because that's
Okay.
easy.
Right.
But that's knowing that, and I
Right.
have an extra master link, because that the chances of me doing something dumb on that KTM are not slim to none, very
Right.
high.
Right. And
So
yeah, and that's a good point. You're talking about two different types of vehicles. One, you're going to be off-road, experiencing a rougher ride. Like you were talking about before, you may have to go up over a log, or you may be, going through some rocky terrain, and you are probably more open to having a situation where you need to fix something on your motorcycle. You're not going to experience a lot of that when it comes to if you're just riding the Harley from, Pennsylvania to Oklahoma. Um, you
Yeah, I
know,
carry an extra clutch for my
okay,
KTM just because of the likelihood of breaking one of them.
there you
So
go.
it's
Okay.
so there's a time and a place for everything. But
Right.
the biggest thing that, and we talk about this, part of that training is, when you're doing that oil change on your motorcycle, you're getting to know it. You're seeing
Yes.
where
Yeah.
where stuff is, where stuff's located. I mean,
Yep.
it isn't just, we talk about there's a difference between Harley owners and Harley riders. You got those Harley owners that they pay the money to do the maintenance, and all they do is, get their bike out on Sunday. And then you got these Harley riders that it doesn't matter if it's rain or shine and bikes breaking down. And you see these guys on the side of the road, they're over there working on the bike, or you got a group of guys that they're all surrounding the bike, working on it. And guess what? After a couple minutes, starts running again. You
Right.
know,
Right.
my Gixxer 750, and I used to ride the crap out of that bike. I got to the point where I was on a trip and it wouldn't start. And literally every time I started that thing, I had to push start it. Well,
Oh,
the the line from the battery to the starter came undone.
okay.
It literally came, and I took the seat off and I started inspecting stuff, and I was like, well, shoot, that screw came out. Well, I went to a hardware store and got another screw, and it's like, well, thank goodness I looked, or I've been pushing that bike push starting forever.
Oh
But
God, that would
how
have
do you know to
sucked.
do that?
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah.
you
You
know a
don't.
little bit about that motorcycle.
Yeah. So, as we get to the end of the show, uh Harley Davidson has kind of been in the news a little bit as of late. You're a Harley owner, I'm a Harley owner, and you see a bunch of different views on what Harley has put out there. And it's not what Harley has put out there, but it's what people have put out there about Harley Davidson as the company, and some of their decisions that they have made recently. We talk about, these companies that go woke, they go broke. Um, you know, I'm they really missed the mark. If this stuff is out there, um, there's some talk about the CEO and where he's going to end up very soon. I hope that they realize the error of their ways. They come out and say, we're sorry, we were wrong, that's not our position. And we get back to, just business as usual. What I will tell you is I've already paid for my Harley Davidson, so I'm not going to go and ride it off the cliff to
You're
say,
not gonna burn it,
screw you,
and
but not going to burn it. For all of you out there that are boycotting a product that you've already given your money to them, listen, that it's your choice, you can do that, but you're not doing much to hurt them. You've already given them your money. Don't go buy anything else, and you won't see me going to a dealership and buying another piece of Harley Davidson merchandise. I won't. I don't have the bike worked on by them anyway, just because it's just insane. But don't give them any more money. Make them realize that they're making a mistake and they have missed the boat when it comes to their core audience on their decision. At the end of the day, you have to make your own choice. And when I first heard it, did I type in www.indianmotorcycle.com onto the website, and look at those bikes? I did, but at the end of the day, we're still
well, a
here
lot of
and I
people,
still ride.
and some of y'all might know this, but the amount of money that Harley Davidson makes off t-shirts and apparel is more than they make off motorcycles.
Yeah.
Because everybody, and I used to be this guy. I rode my bike I had my Scout Sniper platoon reunion up in Chicago about 10 years ago. And I rode from North Carolina to Chicago, longest ride that I
Okay.
ever done. And in order to not sit down that much, I planned my route. And every time I hit a town or a city with a Harley Davidson dealer, I stopped, I hung out, and I bought a t-shirt in every single town on my
Okay.
way up. And I can tell you, I bought more Harley t-shirts than I've bought Harleys. And I think that's how most people are.
Yeah.
And if they do this woke stuff, people aren't going to just sell their Harleys. They're going to keep them, but they're going to start buying less t-shirts.
Oh yeah.
And I heard that because Sturgis stuff happened. I don't know if it's still, it's still happening.
I think it's that. Yeah.
They're taking Harley Davidson dealers out there taking pretty big hit right now.
Are they really?
Everything I've seen out at
Wow.
Sturgis, the amount of people that are basically voicing their opinions, and we're allowed to do that. It's a free country.
As they should. I mean, as they should. Like I said, they need to hear it. They need to hear what their base is saying. And I hope that they make the right choice.
And the president has every right to have his opinion. But the thing is in every opinion we have, if we go out and voice it, sometimes actions have consequences. And I think they're probably going to pay for some of the stuff, because you need to look at the mass of the people buying Harley Davidsons and who they are and how woke those individuals are. That's all I'm saying about that.
Yeah. You know what? You can't argue with that.
You can't make this stuff up. It's great.
No, you can't. So, listen, this episode was obviously about a little bit of mindset, a little bit of being prepared, and how do you do that in a situation where you may not be able to have enough stuff to get you through it. We rely on the cell phones, but if you don't have service, what is your plan? What is your next step? One of the first things you need to do is to remain calm in a situation like that. Panic will only make it worse, and panic will only escalate your time to get through this thing in a safe manner. I felt like this was a pretty fun episode. I felt like it was going to be a fun episode just based off of what he said, because I just remember he was like, man, what am I going to do? And he was like, then I realized I had a cell phone. And we've talked about it a lot in this show before about, okay, great, we have this as a crutch, but what do you do when that crutch isn't there? And that's only for you guys to think about and to start processing on your own. We're here just to shed light, bring the situation to the front, and talk about it. So with that being said, thank you for spending some time with us here, listening to this. If you are more interested in more about his story, Robert Patrick's story, you can find it on YouTube, I am sure. But until next time, you guys stay safe out there. Paul?
Yeah, I'm going to hit on one thing that we haven't talked about. And you're absolutely right. Number one, have a plan, have contingencies, think about these things. In the military, we always, this is what might happen, but worst case scenario, if this happens, I need to consider this and not freak out. But right. I will tell you, one of the things that I've learned taking trips, especially on motorcycles, is if I plan for like a week-long trip or a 4 or 5 day trip, my best advice that I can give to people is add a couple days to that. Add a couple days to that amount of time. Relax, take your time, stop at places, smell the flowers, check out the scenery, check out America, check out this country. It's a beautiful place. There's a ton of things that when you're in your car, you just drive on by and you don't even notice them. The cool thing about my dual sport is I'll drive by a gravel lane. I'm like, well, wonder where that goes. And I'll take it. And man, sometimes I end up in beautiful places, and you see covered bridges. You see parts of America that you would never see if you just stay on highways. And that's the most awesome part about a motorcycle is you get on a nice country, curvy road up in the mountains, and you smell the smells, the temperature changes, and the stuff that you don't experience in a car, man. And it's, the dream is go to Europe, go to the Himalayas. I want to travel the entire world on a motorcycle and just and be free. But you know what? There's so many places around here I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to eventually start branching out. We're going to do that camping trip.
Yes,
we're going to see a lot more of America together. No homo. But man, get out there and man, just experience stuff. And there's no greater way to do it than on a bike, man. It's just a great time. So,
I agree. All right, guys. Until next time, ZP002 out.
XP 0311 Delta, Mr. X out.